Dr. Stone, welcome to the Calm Mom podcast. So grateful you're here spending some time with us today, teaching us. Just so grateful to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about our interview today.
Awesome. So I always like to ask our guests to kind of just give our audience a little backstory before we jump into what we want to talk about today. I'd love to hear a little bit about not only you and your family and your story, but really how you got started in this work.
Yeah, so the reason I got started in this work was my own personal health journey and my own personal story. I,
Yeah.
in college was really dealing with a big weight issue. My hormones were all a mess. I had no menstrual cycle. And so, I went to one of the best OB-GYNs in Austin and I said, hey, could you check my thyroid? I'm really tired and I can't lose weight. I think maybe I have a thyroid problem. And he said, sure. So he draws blood. I go back in a couple of weeks and he's like, well, your thyroid is fine. And,
Mm.
I think that maybe you don't have a period because you exercise a lot. And I thought, what in the world? Is he really telling me that I don't have and like my body fat's too low, which stops your period? I'm like, surely he's not telling me that because I was literally 50 pounds heavier than I am today. And then he
Wow.
said, as he was on his way out, you're likely going to have issues with fertility. So I'll just see you back whenever you're trying to get pregnant. And I was like, did he
Oh
just
my
say that to
word.
me? And so, at that moment, I was thankful. I wasn't thankful at the moment. At the moment, I was really pissed off. But I was like,
I was like, tell me more.
so I was like, I can't believe that he just said that. And I cannot believe I said, this is not going to be my life. And so that was a really big turning point for me because at that time I knew I wanted to be a doctor. I was in pre-med, but I didn't know what kind of doctor I wanted to be. And so I just knew that I had to figure out for myself and my own health, like where I was at, how do I overcome these things? Because this is not going to be my life. So
Yeah.
that kind of led me down this path. And once I figured it out, I was like, oh my gosh, there are millions of women who are suffering from these same symptoms. At the time, I did not know that I likely had Hashimoto's. And, that's why I am on this path. And then, for me, I overcame that. I lost weight. I have two healthy boys, and I conceived them without fertility treatments. But they're older now. I have one that is in college. He plays baseball in college, and I have one that's a senior in high school who also plays baseball. So, and now we live in the Houston area on a regenerative farm and really paying attention to the food that we eat and how do we maintain optimal health.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I think there are a lot of women listening who can probably resonate with at least the first part of your story. Just knowing, right, that there's like something wrong. Like this is not normal. I can remember a time when I felt a lot different and had more energy and felt better and I could lose weight and all of these different things. And I'm not willing to just chalk it up to like, this is just the cost of motherhood or whatever else we tell ourselves, right? When
Yeah.
we're like, I know this is off. And you go to your doctor and they run all the labs and it comes back and similar result, right? They're like, everything's within normal range. And you get some like placating, try this. And you're like, I know it's not that. I've tried everything. I wonder, like, what did you do next to get to, like, did you just start doing research? Did you start, like, what did you next? Because you ended up finding a solution that worked for you.
Yeah. And my journey is probably not going to be what most people's journey are because yes, I just went and got an education and I had to go outside of mainstream and, what took me, 20 years to figure out, I can help patients
Yeah.
do in about 9 months or a year. But I think it's important to remember, like, the path is once you know that something's wrong or you have a symptom,
Yeah.
you have to really get down to the root cause of what's causing the symptom. Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
we have to remember, because we knew this at one point, that the body was born to heal. We are a self-healing organism, and the body's always trying to work towards you, for you, and always towards health. And so you have
Yeah.
to know that your body's trying to help you or tell you something is not right. Now, where we get kind of
Right.
sideways is that most of us, we have underlying imbalances, but we don't have a disease process yet. And so when you go
Mm,
into your doctor's office, they're looking for a disease. And that's not bad or good.
mhm.
I mean, that's good in some instances, right? So you want to know if you have a disease, but in traditional medicine, it's a disease drug therapy model where they're diagnosing the
Yeah.
disease and giving you the medications that go with the disease. But so many of us have symptoms without a diagnosable disease. We have underlying imbalances that are
Yeah.
causing the symptoms, and there is no solution until we wait until that diagnosis comes. And when the diagnosis comes, then
Mhm.
there's loads of medication that come along with it. And with every medication, even though some are very necessary, you always have side effects to those medications because they're really overriding the
Yeah.
body's physiology. The intention is not to
Yeah.
restore balance into the body. So you have to do extensive testing, and testing that's not just geared towards diagnosing a disease, but testing that's going to show you where the underlying imbalances are. And not only
Yeah.
knowing what markers to run, but knowing how to analyze your lab tests so that you are looking for dysfunction and not just disease processes. So those lab ranges are really large. And if you're outside of the lab range, that's when you have a disease process. But what about when
Mhm.
your numbers are falling out of the optimal ranges or the functional ranges?
Yeah.
That's where the beauty and the art and all the information lies within functional medicine, is to find out where the
Yeah.
body has dysfunction. And that
Yeah.
dysfunction either is leading to a disease or you can handle the dysfunction before it becomes a disease. And that's where we start to make big changes with how we feel and how we function.
Yes. Okay. This is so good. So when we talk about root causes, whether they're causing dysfunction or suboptimal levels of whatever it is that's going on, I would assume that there are a lot of different contributing factors to a lot of the symptoms that we're experiencing.
Yep.
Obviously, the food we eat is so important. You talked about living on a regenerative farm now. Our stress levels, right? Some of it probably genetic, and then our lifestyle either contributing to that showing up or not. But can you talk to us a little bit about some of the most common causes, I think, of these imbalances that you tend to see? So people that are listening are like, oh, wow, maybe that's something I should pay attention to. Maybe I should work on how I manage the stress in my life, or maybe I need to be more attuned to what I'm putting in my body, all of these different things.
Yeah. So I'll give you a list of the most common kind of triggers that we see. And the most important one
Okay.
is dysglycemia. That means that you have dysfunction in your blood glucose regulation. What that means is your blood sugar is out of balance. It does not mean that you've been diagnosed with insulin resistance, prediabetes, or diabetes, because those are very obvious. But I will tell you,
Okay.
if any person has a weight issue, meaning like they can't gain weight or they can't lose weight, there's almost always an underlying blood sugar issue. That means that you may be hypoglycemic at times. That means you have a glucose spike at times. You have a lot of variability,
Hmm.
or you just don't have good blood glucose regulation. That's probably the biggest underlying trigger that I see across the board. Those symptoms can mimic exactly low thyroid. So if you put those symptoms side by
Wow.
side, you could say, oh my gosh, I've got low thyroid. But then on the other hand, you'd be like, oh my gosh, I absolutely have a blood sugar problem. And I think that's one of the downfalls, is because we get so locked into the typical symptoms of low thyroid, which is you're tired, you're
Wow.
fatigued, you can't lose weight, you've got brain fog, your hair falls out, you may have anxiety and depression. Those symptoms are exactly dysglycemia or blood sugar dysregulation as well. So the ladies that come to me
Mm.
often are like, I've been diagnosed with low thyroid and they keep telling me that my thyroid levels are normal, but I have all the same
Wow.
symptoms. I'm like, well, that means that maybe those symptoms aren't coming from a thyroid issue. Let's look at your blood sugar.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
blood sugar is huge. You mentioned stress levels and regulating and managing our stress levels? Well, you have two small glands that sit on top of your adrenal, your kidneys, called the adrenal glands, and they help us regulate our stress, right? They produce cortisol
Mm-hmm.
in relationship to stress. But guess what? They also help regulate your blood sugar. They also help with your sleep wake
Okay.
cycles. They also help with your hormone regulation as soon as you're going into perimenopause and through menopause. Your health of your adrenal gland is what's going to dictate how you transition into menopause. Whether you have a terrible time, you've got loads of hot flashes and you become bitchy witchy, or you have none, is really dependent on your adrenal gland function, and how we are managing dealing with stress. So many of us as women, I literally just got off a call with a patient, and she has 5 kids. And, she's, anywhere from right now, the age of 11 to almost 20. So there's a span of
Mm-hmm.
being a mom with lots of kids and lots of stress. And she loves entertaining. So she has like 40 to 60 people over at her house,
Oh
on
my
a
goodness.
monthly basis. And, and she's homeschooling one of her kids. And we look at her cortisol and it's through the roof. And guess what? She has a
Yeah.
hard time losing weight, and she's not sleeping well, and she's fatigued, and she's got some anxiety and
Yeah.
depression. And it's about, our reserves and our resiliency. Like, are our reserves completely depleted and going into negative, or do we have a good reserve
Yeah.
bank? And most of us push through. Most of us as
Yeah.
females, genetically, we have a lot of things going on, and we kind of hold the family together, and we don't have an option
Yeah.
to just, call it in and say, I'm done for the day. We kind of push through and we deplete our reserves. And then all these
Yeah.
things start to happen. And so we do have to remember that if we don't put our health as our number one priority, then we won't be able
Yeah.
to hold it all together. And the body will kind of take over and make you start to replenish your reserves.
Yeah. So for women listening who are thinking, yeah, replenishing my reserves being depleted, that feels about right.
Yep.
What are some, because I'm assuming there are things they can start doing today that will help
Yeah,
grow those reserves. Talk to
absolutely.
me about that.
So first of all, we can think about, the food that we're eating. Like, what causes stress on the
Yeah.
body? It's easy to say, okay,
Yes.
let's get rid of our external life stress, but it's then people say, "Oh, I can't do that." Like, there's no choice in that. I
No.
just have to get through, and I'll deal with the aftermath. So like, if you think about what are
Yeah.
some of the other stressors on the body outside of
Hmm.
what's happening externally, and that's the food that we eat, right? That's working
Yeah.
to manage your blood glucose. It's managing your blood sugar. It's managing your immune system. So we want to think
Hmm.
about the food that causes that gives us energy and nutrients versus the food that depletes and creates more stress on the body. So,
Yeah.
for the most part, I tell my patients that we really need to eat animal protein. We need to eat lots of
Okay.
veggies, little bits of fruit, and good healthy fats. We have to get rid of the ultra processed foods. We have to get rid of the foods that cause inflammation, like gluten, dairy, soy, corn, sugar. All of those things create stress on the body, and they cause an immediate blood sugar spike. And many of those foods
Yeah.
cause a lot of inflammation in the gut and in the body. So that's like a big thing, right? Like,
Mhm.
if we just started to change the foods that
Yeah.
we're eating, that will decrease the stress on the body. The other things we can do is to really get out in nature, to get out of the
Yeah.
screens,
Yeah.
to get out in nature. And, one of the things that is important is to get out in nature and not necessarily go for a run or go for a hard exercise, but just walk and start to
Just to be.
admire and
Yeah.
have some gratitude for. Like, I always go out and it's so cool. Like, I'll go for a walk in the nature and I will look for flowers I've never seen before. Like, each season brings different vegetation, and I'll just try to pick out new things that I can just find amazement at,
Mm.
like how perfect the flowers are, how great it is that I don't have to water them, then they're just growing in nature. And I'll find berries and all kinds of fun things. I kind of go on a nature hike, or just in the nature,
Yeah.
in nature. And that automatically starts to put you into more of parasympathetic. So it's important
Mhm.
that we know we can be in sympathetic overdrive, which is when your body is in fight or
Mhm.
flight, which is when you're putting out fires, solving problems, or your body perceives that maybe a tiger's chasing you, right? You're ready to run,
Yeah.
fight, or hide. Your body physiology completely changes. That means that, your eyes dilate, you shunt all of your blood to your extremities so you can get ready to run. It is not a time to rest, digest, and heal. It is not a time to have sex or have a baby. So when we are
Mhm.
always in sympathetic overdrive, we don't sleep well. We
Yeah.
start to develop constipation. We have low sex drive. We have infertility. And we start to have buildup of inflammation, because when you sleep is when your body heals and you clear plaquing from the brain, you clear inflammation from the body. And so it further depletes our reserves when we're not sleeping, and then when
Mhm.
we're also in sympathetic overdrive.
Yeah. Oh, I love all of that so much. And it's so true that any non-essential system will kind of be paused, right? When we're stuck
Yep.
in fight or flight or sympathetic response. I had a client I was working with yesterday, and she's like, man, my creativity, I don't know what it is. It's just like shot lately. Like I used to love to read and I used to love to like write and make art and do all these things. And she's like, I have no creativity. And it was to that same exact point. I'm like, of course you don't. I'm like, your body sees that as, superfluous right now. It's all about survival. Let's get you to a place where it feels safe enough for that part of your brain to come back online. And that's, creativity. But you're right. When we talk about our digestive system and our immune
Mhm.
system and our reproductive system, then we really start to see the trickle down of how the impact of the stress that we're experiencing impacts all those other systems and then symptoms that we experience.
Yeah, I think it's incredible, because as we start to go through life, it's not usually like one day you can't get out of bed. It usually like happens
Uh,
over a long period of
yeah.
time. And then like what you said
Right.
earlier, it's like you go to the doctor and they're like, "Oh, well just get used to it. You just had a baby," or "Oh, just get used to it. You're postmenopausal," or "Oh, you just get used to it because you're 68 years old." Right. And so we start to
Right.
change the way that we perceive our health and how life is going to go. But the craziest thing is, as you start to lose your reserves, you lose your creativity and your passions. And it's so exciting for me to see when I take patients through this process. I work with a lot of artists and they're like, I'm painting again, or I'm writing again, or I am
Beautiful.
photographing again, or I'm doing I had a patient who's 70 years old, and one of her goals was to really get her graphic design business going again. And she did it. And it's amazing to start to see women say, oh my gosh, I can start this
So
business
awesome.
now. And you just start to see the lights turn on again, but your creative centers in your brain shut down because it's non-essential, just like what you said.
Yeah, yeah. I love seeing that too. Sometimes when I run through some of their symptoms of women that I'm working with, I'm like, this is really good news because as your nervous system, right, starts to regulate and you start to like incorporate these different ways of being, you're going to notice that there's actually some progress here. And a lot of those are going to dissipate and you're not going to have to go out and spend a ton of money or take these pills for the rest of your life or whatever it is, right? It's like you have, like you said, you were born to heal. It's good, really
Yeah.
good news.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the adrenals. I want to talk about the thyroid a little bit. I think that's
Mhm.
something that we just hear not only thrown around, but I think to your point where it's like, I'm feeling tired, I can't lose weight, it must be my thyroid. Like, even though we have no idea, I'll say, like, I have no idea what I'm talking about. I would say something like that. It's just like this association that we
Yep.
have. So teach us about our thyroid. What is it? Its function, and then maybe some. I mean, I guess you alluded to one of the, not necessarily a misconception, but like, what are we attributing to the thyroid that might not be a thyroid problem, kind of thing.
Well, your thyroid is a small gland that sits at the base of your neck. It's shaped like a butterfly. And the purpose of the thyroid is to regulate your metabolic rate. All right. So it speeds up or slows down your metabolism. It's extremely important. It's the only hormone in the body that has receptor sites at every single cell in the body. So it affects you from head to toe, literally. So when
Wow,
your
that's so
thyroid
cool.
is off, and that's why it can create such a host of symptoms, and it can really drive us
Yeah.
crazy. And it really creates a lot of issues. But one of the biggest misconceptions about the thyroid is that you get this diagnosis of primary hypothyroidism, meaning like your thyroid just stopped working. See, the body doesn't work like that. The body doesn't just stop working. There's usually like we got to
Yeah.
ask the question, did my thyroid really just stop working? Or maybe we should ask the question, if it did, why is that happening?
Yeah.
And the research shows that 90 to up to 98% of women have an underlying autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's. That means that the immune system is tagging your thyroid tissue for destruction. Essentially, your thyroid tissue is
Wait a minute. 98% of women?
who've been diagnosed with low thyroid. So if you've been
Okay.
diagnosed with
Wow,
low
okay.
thyroid, up to 98% of us have Hashimoto. So if you've been diagnosed with low
Wow.
thyroid, you might as well just think or assume that you have
Yeah.
Hashimoto's. And if
Okay.
you have a lot of low thyroid symptoms and you're not low thyroid yet, you can still have Hashimoto's. So Hashimoto's turns on, this whole underlying autoimmune issue turns on, and it takes a while for it to destroy enough of the thyroid tissue for you to actually be diagnosed with low thyroid. So many women have
Wow.
Hashimoto's, they don't have low thyroid, they have all the thyroid symptoms, but they just don't have
Yeah.
an answer yet because they haven't run those antibodies. So
Okay.
we actually have an underlying autoimmune condition. And that's why, even though they may give us thyroid hormones, or maybe our thyroid looks normal, that we still have all of these
Mhm.
symptoms because it's an underlying autoimmune condition that's not being addressed.
Wow. Okay, so what are some of those symptoms?
Yeah. So some of those symptoms for classic hypothyroid is you can't lose weight, you feel tired or extremely fatigued, you can have
Yeah.
depression and anxiety, your hair falls out, you have brain fog, you're not sleeping well at night, you can have hot flashes. So those are the classic symptoms of low thyroid. And you'll still have those symptoms even if your thyroid has been quote unquote normalized with thyroid medication. Now, it doesn't mean you don't need to take the thyroid medication. It means that once your thyroid hormones are stable, what's causing the rest of the symptoms? Right? So, why is your immune system still out of balance? Is it a blood sugar issue? Is it an adrenal issue? Do you have food sensitivities, underlying infections, toxins in the body, leaky gut? So, like all of those other things contribute
Mhm.
to an imbalance in the immune system. So, we have to go deeper than this low thyroid diagnosis because that's very elementary
Yeah.
and it's very surface. And because it's so surface, so many women still struggle with all these symptoms, even though they're on thyroid medication.
Wow. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I'm curious when we talk about moving our body, and how important it is to get exercise. If women who are listening are experiencing a lot of the symptoms that you just ran through, if there are certain types of movement that are better for them or that you would recommend, or certain types of movement that they should avoid as they're in this process of healing their body.
Yeah, so that's such a great question. Having a sedentary lifestyle is one of the worst things we could possibly do for any condition for the human
Yeah.
body. That means if you're sitting for more than an hour to an hour and a half at a time, you immediately start to create inflammation. So we have to
Wow.
get our bodies moving. Now, with that being said, when you're dealing with autoimmunity and you have really low reserves, it's very easy to overexercise. And so
Yeah.
it's almost like you have to figure out as an individual person what your capacity is for movement.
Yeah.
Some of my ladies can walk to the mailbox and back. And that's all they can do. If they do more than that, they're in bed the next day trying to recover, which it seems like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, well, they have extremely depleted reserves. But I'm still
Yeah.
encouraging them to find out where that tipping point is so that they can exercise but not overdo it. One of the things that you can think about, did I overdo it, is can you do the same thing the next day? Right. So like
Okay.
if you ran a mile, if you can't run a mile the next day and you have to recover, then it was too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe it's walking a mile. Who knows what it is? Now, if you are doing resistance training, which is highly recommended, if you're working those body parts, you're supposed to be sore and probably not a good idea to be able to do it the next day. So that's a little bit different. But
Yeah.
if it takes you 2 and 3 and 4 days to recover, you overdid it. And so we have
Okay.
to just find that balance, and that balance is unique for each individual and it correlates to their reserve levels. So getting up and moving the body is imperative, but finding that
Yeah.
fine point where you're not overdoing it. You could do it the next day, and it doesn't take you a lot to recover, and it doesn't totally wipe you out. So building up your reserves as you're getting motion and movement allows you to increase stamina, increase exercise tolerance without depleting them again.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And it also makes sense why I think sometimes, women they're like, I worked out, but then I felt worse after, right? Or I was
Yeah,
so exhausted for
exactly.
the rest of the day. That explains what's going on. Okay, before we let you go, I want to hear about your farm. So will you just share with us a little bit about this story, how this came to be, if this was something you always wanted to do, if it was like happenstance, how it runs? Like, I just want to know all the things.
Okay, so no, I am a city girl and I wear stilettos. And so then me on a farm is quite funny. So this was not a dream of mine. This was something that kind of happened uh, due to COVID and us really being able to see what's happening to our food supply.
Okay.
So for me, you know, during COVID, all the grocery stores were empty. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this could be a real thing where we don't have access to food. And the food that we have access to, we're at total effect of whatever somebody is doing to it and how they're
Yeah.
growing it. So during COVID, I started a garden. And I was in Colorado at the time. And then, with the uncertainty of COVID and all of this stuff, my husband's like, hey, let's move back to, no, he said, let's buy some land and start a farm. My husband is very metro. So this is not, he's not even handy. Okay. And he would tell you that. I'm not talking bad about him. He would tell you that also. I'm the handy one of us both. So I'm like, move to acreage? You want to do what? So he's like, how about Arkansas? I'm like, oh dear God, we are not moving to Arkansas. What in the world? I'm like, if we're moving anywhere, we're going to move close to my family because my dad is very handy. So I'm like, we'll move somewhere
Smart.
close to my family and, but not too close. So we're kind of 3 hours away from everybody. And so I love animals, and I did grow up in 4-H. So I raised sheep and, I am an animal lover. And I was a gardener. So I knew how to garden as well. I knew how to do organic gardening and companion planting, and how do we do it so that we're regulating the bugs and the pests, but also making the soil really great. So then I said, all right, I'm just going to dive into this. And so I did, my YouTube education on regenerative farming, and I started consuming every online course that there was. And the more I dug into it, the more I was like, holy cow, this is exactly like functional medicine, but it's just for the earth and for the animals. And then the more that you dig in, it's like the microbiome of the soil indicates the microbiome of your animals and the health of the animals. The more I learned, I knew that I knew I was particular about the food and the protein that I was eating, like grass fed and grass finished. And it was during COVID when they were killing all the cows in feedlots. I'm like, why are they doing that? I just could not understand why they wouldn't just let them live for like 6 more months when the slaughterhouse is open to go have them processed. But come
Right.
to find out, They were all diabetic. They're all diabetic cows, and they were not going to live that long. So they had to
Oh
do
my
something so that they can control, so that animals weren't just dying right in the feedlot. They had to handle this issue because the animals were so unhealthy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, so it just drove me even
wow.
more to start to really, create this regenerative farm. And regenerative farming means that you care about the soil. The soil is the most important thing because it's the microbiome of the grasses that you grow, the grass that the cows eat and the sheep eat and everybody else eats. And then that's going to
Mhm.
determine the health of your meat, which will determine like the omega-3, 6, and 9 balance of the meats that we're eating. And I, as I was getting into it, people would say, like, when your cows were sick, oh, just give them this medication or give them this shot. I'm like, okay. So I'm the crazy one making smoothies out of alfalfa and apple cider vinegar and rosemary and thyme from the garden, and then healing the animals in a natural way. And so, now I have every animal known to man. I've got Highland cattle, I've got sheep and pigs and chickens and turkeys. And so I'm the crazy, like, not cat lady, but I'm the crazy chicken lady. I think I've got more than 100 chickens right now.
Well,
So yeah, just, now it's a passion project, and I have a retreat center. And so everything we're really working towards farm to table, but it takes a little bit longer to get everything established. So the retreats are mostly farm to table. And yeah, so that's just kind of been a fun passion project, and hopefully it can turn into something more.
that is so cool. That's amazing. I love every part of this, and it's fascinating and heartbreaking, I guess, what you were discovering, and then what you were discovering in a bad way, right? And
Yeah,
now what you're discovering, and the way that you have the ability to kind of like work with these different variables to optimize the health of the animals, and how
yeah,
similar it is to us, right? Wow.
I know.
That is so cool. I love it so much. Okay, so for people listening who are like, yes, like checking the mental list of all of these symptoms, maybe their traditional doctor hasn't been able to give them any, not only an explanation, but any resources or help, and they'd love to connect with you and learn more about you and the work that you're doing and how you might be able to help them. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so Facebook is the best place to find me. So I have a Facebook group called Happy, Healthy, and Lean. And we have over, I think, 53,000 ladies in that group right now. And it is the coolest group because
Amazing.
I'm very particular. If we have negative Nancy's, they get kicked out. So we have a really great, positive group of ladies who are on a very similar health journey, and they're like minded. And that is
Yeah.
so important to have a good support system because not everybody is on this journey. And I think when we start to make big changes, if we don't have a support system, it's really easy to fall off or go back to old habits because we don't know how to navigate this path. And so on Facebook, Happy, Healthy, and Lean is great. And I do a master class pretty much every month where I spend
Okay.
hours with these lovely ladies. And I also do Thyroid Thursday every Thursday night within that group. So accessing that group,
Wow.
Happy, Healthy, and Lean, is going to be the best way.
That is so cool. I love that. We'll link that in the show notes for you guys so you can go check it out. Well, thanks again for being with us today. I've learned so much. I loved your story about your farm. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing and that passion and awareness that you're spreading. Thanks for making the time to be with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.